Thank you, Dan, for curating this, and thanks to Jakob and Elizabeth. Okay, so Emily, I've stalked you all day today. I know everything about you.
Just internet stalked, to be clear.
Yes, you're right. I just internet stalked you. And the weird thing is, I think there's probably a German word for this, like gazelle cell or something, but I was reading you and writing stuff down, and then I was listening to NPR, and then I heard you on NPR at the same time that I was writing down your name.
I was not talking about tennis.
You were not. You were talking about a court case about cell phones and whether they can be used as evidence.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, this is such a magical thing. And then I just realized that's just because you're constantly reporting and doing amazing stuff, and I'm always in my underwear making coffee in my home. So that's basically what happened. So it wasn't as magical as I thought it was. Maybe.
Oh, that's pretty nice. Thank you.
But anyway, you're great. I read Sticks and Stones today, and I've read a bunch of your articles, and you're a very well-versed person. But now our job is to hear something odder from you and hear about your obsession. And then the way I feel about this is that we help a writer understand themselves and then leave here feeling like you just went to therapy. That's our job.
All right.
Okay.
I'm going to take that on.
Okay, good. So tell us about this obsession of yours.
Okay, I will. I want to quickly start by thanking Jacob for the nice introduction, and Dan Savage for bringing me here, and Jakob and the other Penn literary folks who've been great about organizing, and all of you for coming out on this completely dreadful night in which I myself have been feeling all day like a kind of country mouse who came in from Connecticut and is very wet. So thank you for being here. I was playing tennis last weekend on an outdoor court. It was like the only nice day we've had so far. And a couple of courts away, there was a father and daughter playing, a teenager. And they were neither of them particularly good at tennis, but they were there for a very long time. I would say 2 hours. And the whole time was kind of pockmarked by these moments where the father would really berate his daughter and tell her that she wasn't. The particular thing that stuck in my mind was he kept saying, move, in this very vehement way. And I found this excruciating to listen to. And on the breaks between games, my partner and I were talking about it because it was really pretty loud and persistent. And she said that she felt like this daughter was really in the wrong, was being incredibly entitled and annoying. And I was only angry with the dad in the story and felt like he was treating his daughter badly and not understanding. Although, as my partner pointed out, he was spending this 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon trying to teach his daughter how to play tennis. And I couldn't really give him any credit for that. So I also have to say that as I was listening to this, all this tension was building in me, and I completely fell apart in my own tennis game, which happens for many reasons, but on that day I think was related to this dynamic. So the very obvious connection is that I've been playing tennis since I was 5 or 6. My dad taught me to play. For him, tennis was really kind of a religion and almost like a sort of childhood salvation. It was something he really loved doing, that he basically taught himself how to do and progressed at and took enormous satisfaction from and a sense of pride in. And so he taught me, and I have 3 younger sisters, he taught us all to play. He spent an enormous amount of time doing that. And for me, it was it had always this pain to it, because I was never as good as I felt like I should be, given all the time and money being poured into this. And I never felt like I was anywhere near performing the way he wanted me to perform. Sometimes we actually played mixed doubles together in tennis tournaments, which was really difficult for me. And my whole experience of tennis growing up was that I wanted to be inside reading a book. I was like a little skinny kid with big glasses. And my dad kept pushing me to do this outdoor sport that I really didn't feel confident at and didn't really like doing. So you would think as an adult that one could just sort of liberate oneself from this dynamic, right? The great thing about growing up is you no longer have to do the things that your parents wanted you to do that you didn't like. But tennis was the only game that I ever learned how to play, because part of my dad's obsession, he didn't let us play ping pong because he thought it would like ruin our tennis swing. So I didn't have a whole lot of other I had really zero other choices. I did rebel in high school by running track, and I loved track. The reason I loved running track was that it was very consistent. There was no mental breakdown to be had in track. Like, you ran the quarter mile. My time for the quarter mile was in like a 2-second range for my whole high school career. I didn't get much better at it, but I did not have moments where I lost to people who I felt like were much worse than me. It was very straightforward. And when I think about this rationally, because I've been obviously thinking about talking tonight, I think it would make a lot more sense for me to train to run like 5Ks or 20Ks right now. If I want to do something athletic and push myself, that would be the psychologically kind of wise choice to make. But for a reason I don't understand, now in my 40s, I've become re-obsessed with tennis. I didn't play very much in my 20s. When my kids were little in my 30s, I didn't have time nor much of the inclination. But lately, I've been really trying to improve. And it's kind of mysterious. And it's not working very well. I mean, it would have been much better if I could have come and given you this narrative arc where I started trying to get better, and in fact, I succeeded. But there is nothing else like this in my life. I'm not sure that it's actually really possible for me ever to play at the level that it seems like I should be capable of. And so my sort of joke about this, though it's true, is that in most of my professional life, I'm really a competent person. Like, I'm a person, if I work for you, I'll do what I said. You'll be generally pretty happy with it. I feel like people value my contributions. If I worked and lived my life, raised my children the way I play tennis, I would be a homeless person. It's just a completely different thing where somehow in this one domain, I have no faith in myself. I expect everything to go wrong. I anticipate underperforming and blowing it, and then that's exactly what happens. And it's kind of torture. So in the last year or so, and this is really a little masochistic, right? I started playing for an actual team where you play matches, like the USTA all across the country for people who want to play competitive tennis, but, are in their 40s and not real tennis players. You can play on teams and compete with other women or men who are about your level. I was on a team at one level. I lost enough matches to get bumped down a level. And then I thought, well, okay, again, this is the time to stop doing this. Like, maybe I'm having fun doing this, playing this game. Socially, I can play with my husband or friends, and I enjoy that, but maybe I just need to recognize that this competitive atmosphere is really not one I'm ever going to feel good about or succeed in. But I can't somehow let it go. I think there's something about, how can I stop now that I've dropped? Like, shouldn't I at least try to have some kind of upswing? But I will tell you that when I go to these matches, even matches that are with people who really clearly I'm going to beat, I get full of, honestly, like physical panic. I mean, I can be here with you all and my heart rate's pretty normal. I can go on national television. My heart rate is, again, I can sort of I don't feel, when I play in a tennis match, my heart is pounding, and it's not because I'm physically exerting myself. It is just pure nerves. It's really kind of a horrible way to feel. And the other thing is, you cannot play tennis well if you're physically panicking, right? Because you get tense. And there's some amazing irony in the idea that the only game I know how to play, which I'm trying to improve at, is one in which everybody has mental breakdowns in tennis. Like, it's the classic head game. It's the game in which the whole competition is in some ways about not beating yourself. So I have sort of the exponential version of that, which I don't seem to be able to know how to fix. So before I stop telling my sort of sad story about this, the one sort of bright side in the last year is I found a teacher I really like a super sane, lovely man who is not beset by all these, he doesn't even really get it. And so he has been really helping me with the mechanical parts of my game, like my forehand swing wasn't right. He's been helping me fix it. I double fault a lot. That should not be any surprise to you since you've been listening to this story, because that's another kind of classic moment where you're beating yourself. He's helping me with that too. So that's been, I guess, rewarding, and yet I still feel like I can't translate the way I play when I'm playing with him into any kind of match setting. And sadly, it's not just the team matches that this happens in, it's even just playing with women I play with regularly if I feel like there's anything at stake, if I feel like they're judging me in any way. So lately what I've been realizing is that there is this whole group of women in Connecticut who feel sorry for me and basically think of me as like, honestly, as a failure. I'm fairly pathetic. And and they're not people who know who are like part of my professional life in any way. So it's not like they think, oh, Emily Bazelon, she also is a journalist. They just think like, I wonder what her problem is. And so that's sort of awful. Like when you're being reflected back in the eyes of people who, for understandable reasons, don't have a lot of reason to respect your performance, that's a terrible feeling. So maybe that's good because it's humbling and there is a way in which everybody should have some reminders that they have things where they're not measuring up, and it's entirely healthy to put yourself in that situation. Or maybe it's not. Maybe that's like only undermining in the end. And what I really need to do, this is what my husband thinks, is to just play tennis socially when I'm enjoying it and not push myself to try and succeed at any kind of competition, because maybe this is just not in the cards. Maybe it's not a game that I'm actually going to win.
Oh, wow. So you've got to be kind of good. I mean, you can hit the ball and...
Yeah. No, I'm like a socially... Right. Yes.
So
I'm kind of good.
All right. So I hate to be like Mr. Therapist because I'm not right off, but like what... Okay, so what is a good game to your dad? Like what do you think...
Oh, so at this point my dad isn't judging me anymore. He's like happy I'm playing, but I'll answer the question. So, college level tennis. So two of my two sisters who played in tennis played Division III college tennis.
So they were better than you?
Yeah. I didn't go, unfortunately, I didn't go to a Division III school. Well,
okay.
Maybe. I mean, honestly, the truth is, it was the best thing for me in the world that I went to a school where the tennis team was too good and I couldn't make the team, because I went off and did other things in college and kind of detached myself from this whole regimen. But I guess that was probably the standard, was like if I could have played Division III. And I think people who compete in college they know how to compete in a way that I never learned.
Okay, so it's funny that you say that, because when I was reading your interview with Lisa Raymond, who won the bronze doubles, is that what she won?
Yeah, she's like an amazing doubles player.
And you played her when she was 9 and you were 12.
Yes,
right?
And she beat me 6-love, 6-1. She was amazing. But
Right.
I remembered who she was. She was like the one. There are lots of people who beat me 6-love, 6-1 when I was little. Believe me, and now. But she was the one person that I was like, that girl. She was amazing, and in fact, she was
and
that
she
girl.
ends up being a champion of sorts. And so you played her, and then you interviewed her last year, I guess.
Yeah. So Lisa, she's still playing and winning doubles titles, and last year when she was 39, she took a 19-year-old partner, and there were a couple articles about her. So I just found her on Twitter and asked her if I could interview her.
And the interview is really great, because she sounds really interesting, but also your energy is really kind of hilarious, because I could tell you're just like, what about this? What about that? Oh my God, how do you play it? Like you're really kind of dorky about it, which is kind of great. And then there's this one point where you say, you talk about how you dread competition. Like she's like, well, you have to be competitive to do this, and you're like, and she's like, what do you think about that? And you're like, I dread competition.
Yes, it's true.
And so I want to hear you talk about that. Like what?
Yeah, I just am not interested in. I have always shied away from it. It doesn't have any appeal to me. The whole idea, I can't really get my mind around the idea that the way that two teams or two people go into an event and only one of them gets to come out as having been successful. right? There's
Right.
so many more instances in life where we all go do something together and everyone gets to succeed. But with sports, one side, by definition, has to come away disappointed or even heartbroken. And that's just the way it is. That the stakes have to be set up that way. I kind of hate that. I always want to stop playing tennis when it's like 5-5 or 6-6 in the set. I don't want to find out which side won. Partly because I don't want to lose, but also because I don't especially want to win either. This is really not helpful if you're ever going to compete.
But it's so weird because it really feeds into your work about bullying. It's like you're talking about people feeling bad, right? I mean, and so when you were you talk about how you were a kid, you wore glasses and you wanted to read. What were you like as a kid? What did you?
I was like pretty nerdy, basically.
And I'm sorry.
So shocking.
I'm sorry because I'm sure that in the many readings you did for Sticks and Stones, people have asked you what you were like, if you were bullied as a child. But I'm really curious about that. Like,
I was more the kid who was bullied. So my book, starts with an anecdote from 8th grade where my friends fired me, which at the time was really painful. I had this moment where I felt like my friends were literally turning their back, and I felt ostracized. And that's a memory that's not unlike these, in that it was really humbling, and I kind of carry it with me. Yeah.
And so that was 8th grade?
That was 8th grade.
And were athletics like a big part of 8th grade?
No, not really.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Philadelphia. I went
Okay.
to a Quaker school, and I played on the tennis team, but nobody cared about the tennis team. I don't know if there are schools where people do, but the tennis team was highly uncool. All the girls played lacrosse and field hockey.
So being popular was not really tied up to athletics in a way.
No, not for me. I mean, I think it was part of why I was kind of nerdy, that I wasn't like a great lacrosse or field hockey player, but
Right.
I don't think I would have been anyway.
But there were popular people who weren't always athletic.
Yeah,
Right?
there were. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. I just want to know. First of all, I think we would have been friends in high school or 8th
That's so
grade.
nice, Mike. Good.
Well, because I was very unathletic, and balls would just hit me in the head. Not the good balls, like bad balls would hit me in the head. And so it was just like that was it. I was in that, and somehow that translates to being not popular when you're not very athletic,
especially for boys, right?
Yeah, and here's where I think that you are a little bit gay because you found your athleticism later in life, which I think a lot of us guys who didn't do team sports and couldn't do that,
right? Totally.
You're just like, oh wait, athletics is not about.
And now you're like the most amazing buff people around often.
Well, that's scary, but or steroidal sometimes scarily, and on crystal. But so you discover your athleticism later in life, right? And then there's this weird sort of like, oh my God, I can actually move my body through space. And so that becomes like a big part of you, right?
Right, but there are different ways, obviously, to choose to do that. And it was definitely less stressful and anxiety-provoking in my 20s and 30s when I ran more and did more yoga and didn't really play very much tennis.
Right.
I don't know why I am not, I don't know.
But maybe you're not that bad. I feel like you're not that bad.
Well, I'm not that bad. It's just that I crack under pressure.
Because of the competition thing.
Yeah, because of the competition thing. I think also, so one of the things I took from interviewing Lisa Raymond, who's had this amazing, like if Lisa Raymond was a singles player, you would absolutely know her name. She's basically had a 20-year professional, successful tennis career as a doubles player.
And she's really short.
She's short. She's like 5'2".
Yeah, which is sort of unusual for...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So one of the things she said to me, which I could have grabbed onto, was that the reason she won was that she always won. So her memories of herself were winning. And so when she would get into a pressured situation in tennis where it was deuce or add out or add in and she needed to win that game, her memories, her kind of imprint was of herself succeeding in that moment, and that's why she could continue to succeed, because she just naturally thought that should happen next. So I guess it's believing in yourself, but I mean in a little bit different way, where you actually have a physical muscle memory of doing the right thing in that moment that goes along with your psychology. And the way you succeed in tennis is by being aggressive on the court. So she also became really comfortable with the idea that you come in, you put the ball away. So I have the opposite. I have the feeling in every pressured situation on the tennis court that I'm going to lose the point. And what I like to do is stand back on the baseline and have the other person make the error. And at the level I'm trying to play out right now, that you just don't win. It doesn't work. The other person comes in and puts the ball away. You have to be willing to come in and approach, like, the net is part of it, hitting volleys and overheads well, but it's really about the kind of mid-court approach shots, setting up that next point. And to do that, you have to be pushing yourself forward all the time and comfortable thinking of yourself as the aggressor. And I think in some fundamental way, when I play tennis, I want to hang back.
Right.
And it doesn't work.
Okay, but here's the other thing. Let's go through it from this angle. Okay, you are an incredibly successful, really articulate, really fucking cool writer, and clearly there's a bit of competitiveness that one needs to have gotten to your career at some certain point, right? I mean, you have to be like, I have to finish this bullying book before that
Someone
bitch
else.
Katie Couric does it. You know, like, I don't know. You have to, right? So there's like there's some competitiveness that you are exhibiting in your real life.
And certainly aggression, right? Yeah.
Sure, right. You just have to be, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like you're not... and competitive sounds negative to me, but...
No, but you're absolutely right. And aggressive is right in with this. You're right. Professionally, I am both competitive
But when you
and
get on
aggressive.
the court or whatever, I don't even know any tennis terms. Like
It's called a court.
Okay, it's called... Okay, good. You get there and suddenly your knees get weak and you're getting all freaked out, but you would want to keep doing it. I think it's really impressive that you want to keep doing it. You're not like shying away from it. There's something you want to get to there.
Yeah, well, I think I keep hoping I'm somehow going to start, I'm going to turn, this is just going to change, and I'm going to walk out one day for a match, and I'm going to play up to my idea of my own capabilities, which if you saw me practice, you would see, like, I should be able to do this quite well. And my knees are not going to get knocking together. My heart is not going to race. I'm not going to be unable to toss the ball for my serve with, like, my arm actually moving in a relaxed way. That will all happen, and then I'll just sort of be cured. Like, there'll be some moment where it's like fog is lifted. But I don't know. I mean, probably I should go see a sports psychologist, I guess.
There are those things? There's sports psychologists?
There definitely are those things, yes. But that seems like a step too far, right?
Well, it seems like a lot of money.
I mean, I could just come here and talk to you.
Totally. The person who's like the opposite of sports. But do you make noises? Like, is it Monica Seles, the one who makes noises?
Yeah, and there are other
people
who make noises.
Person?
No, I don't actually almost ever make noises.
Okay.
And maybe that's part of being uncomfortable with displaying
my-
aggression. I do yell at myself a lot, but that's different.
Oh, that's not good.
No.
But I think you should make noises. I think you should grunt more.
I think that's actually really good advice.
Thanks. That'll be $190. Okay, do we have any questions? I'll keep talking, but if anyone has any questions, please
or
chime
stories
in.
of their own sports
athletic.
childhood demons.
Right here?
I actually have a question about, when you talk about tennis, like, there is like an aggression that you need in order to, win. Do you think that there's a comparison between your obsession with tennis or just the game of tennis in general when it comes to the subject of bullying?
Well, maybe. I mean, I think that there's a way in which sports is a safe space for bullying and aggression. Like, there's a sort of harsh reality to sports. So, in other settings, when you're in a group dynamic or a team of people collaborating, you don't essentially, well, I don't know, maybe you do. But I don't have an experience of being essentially shunted to the side because of underperforming. Whereas on a team, that is in fact what happens. You bench the people who are not playing well until they play better, or maybe forever, right? That is how it works. There's sort of a brutal reality to it, and I think I'm deeply uncomfortable with that, and that's part of why I was drawn to writing about bullying, but I'm also kind of fascinated by it because it's so stark.
In your research for the book, did you did you see more bullying happening in athletic situations or less? Or is it because it was regimented, there was less of acting out because people are...
Bullying is a big problem in sports.
Okay.
We saw this big dramatic story play out on the Miami Dolphins this year. And what interested me the most about that story was the way in which everyone was so shocked that a 300-pound football player could be bullied. But the dynamic that was reflected in that story was one that has played out on countless high school, middle school, and college, and maybe professional teams, where you have the people who are the veterans who are somehow have control of the team, and they decide to essentially turn one team member's vulnerabilities into his worst nightmare by exposing him. So that was the weird dynamic that Richie Incognito seemed to have with Jonathan Martin. They both called the relationship kind of bipolar because they were friends when they were on their own quite intimately. And then Incognito would kind of turn the trust that Martin showed in him, the things he learned about Martin, against Martin in the team setting. And that is definitely something that happens and that coaches have to really guard against. They have to protect kids because it's Lord of the Flies out there on a team. And everybody knows who the good players are, who the kind of solid mid-level players are, and who kind of sucks.
It reminds me of the sort of the salute you wrote to Pat Summitt. The basketball coach. Yeah. And you mentioned how she is taking people, that teams are complex organisms, and that you're taking people who haven't figured out who they are yet, and you're giving them like space to figure out who they are, but also compete. So
right, because she's a college basketball women's coach, so
right.
She has these relatively young athletes who are still molding themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there's another question in there. Yeah.
So my single piece of advice, and I think it applies to sons as well, is that, usually there are sort of a range of things kids can do that they can become passionate about. And I think generally it's better to try to let the kid figure out what that thing is. The weird thing about my growing up was that was predetermined. Like, come on, there's no particular reason why I had to play tennis as opposed to run track or play the piano. These are things that are neutral. They have the same value, or maybe tennis has less value because it's sort of a snobby sport. I don't know. You can make lots of arguments about this. So I think generally when parents let kids take the lead just a little bit, that the outcome seems to me like it's much better. So in my own life, when my younger son really wanted to stop playing the guitar at the age of 9, not an age at which you're a grown-up making decisions, you have some moment where you're either going to push your kid to do something he doesn't want to do, or you're going to give up. And my younger son had this great guitar teacher who I thought was wonderful, but he really didn't want to do it, and we gave up. And I'm not sorry, honestly. Simon can do other things. So I would imagine, Jacob, with your daughter, that you're attuned to what she's interested in, and then if you want to push a little bit, that's different. The answer to the other part of your question is that, so first of all, I should say I have a huge amount of affection and gratitude to my dad. This is the one part of my childhood that was really difficult for me, but he was a great dad, and I don't want to exaggerate because that would be wrong and a little bit silly. And my younger sisters, I think simply by virtue of not being the oldest, sometimes parents make mistakes on oldest kids or have an amped up way of thinking about their oldest children that the younger children don't experience. And my younger sisters were basically better at tennis than me and didn't have the same kind of pressure. The big difference was that when I was 10, for a few years, my dad found a tennis program that was from 6 in the morning to 8 in the morning on Saturday mornings. And it was an hour from our house. And it meant that I could not go to any slumber parties. I know that's middle-class problem, but when you're a girl of those ages, it was kind of rotten. And so I really hated the whole thing. But he did take me out to breakfast afterward every single week. That was not something he did with any of my sisters. None of it. I mean, it was ridiculous that we were driving an hour to play tennis at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. It was crazy. And so with my sisters, that didn't happen. And I think there was a way in which the whole thing just was healthier and more balanced. And now my sisters play some tennis, don't play some tennis, seem very unpsychodrama about it, honestly. And one of my sisters is really good at taking out her aggression on the tennis court and is very determined competitor and really at peace with competitor. This is my sister who's like a really excellent criminal defense trial lawyer. She brings exactly those same skills to the tennis court, and so even though she doesn't play very much anymore, it's kind of awesome.
But and there's the point. You bring your skills to the tennis court too, because you're talking about sympathy and empathy and bullying. So you're like I don't know who wants to win here.
But you can't empathize with your tennis opponent
no,
and
you
win.
Can't.
Those are just like two. It doesn't work.
It doesn't. You're right. But okay, and the other thing that I was forced to play soccer from age whatever to high school, and I sucked so bad I scored goals for the other team. I just wanted to
goals for the other team.
Yeah,
that's
goals
impressive.
for the team. I did that twice. I just remember picking up dandelions and braiding them and putting them in my hair and stuff.
You were like Ferdinand.
Pretty much. And and it took me as a kid, I think it takes you a really long time to figure out that you can say that you don't want to do something. And it's this weird thing, you don't, and I think you write about this in Sticks and Stones a lot, about how hard it is for children to articulate their feelings and really get to the point of where they can say what they believe,
Yeah.
So was there ever a point when you were playing tennis where you're like, I don't want to do this?
Yes. When I was 15 or 16, I stopped playing tournaments. There also are, unsurprisingly, USTA tournaments on regional and local and national levels for teenagers. I was never good enough to play on the national level, but I was playing on the regional level, and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And it was kind of, it's ridiculous, but it was in my house, fairly rebellious move to make. So I did. I really took a stand. I didn't quit entirely, but I refused to compete in that particular way. And that, that was my act of refusing to go in this direction. So why am I now putting myself in that position?
So wait, how old were you when you decided that you were like, I'm not going to do this anymore?
I was 15 or 16. I'm pretty sure I was 15. And it had to do with having a boyfriend, actually, too. It was this moment where I was establishing my own identity. My boyfriend, at that point, my dad had found a tennis program that was from 7 to 9 p.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. What better thing to do with your 16-year-old daughter? It was a great idea. I just refused to do it. And it really did have to do with my kind of independent social life.
And so you have two sons, right?
Yes.
And they both play soccer?
They play soccer and squash and no tennis. They don't want to play tennis.
And do they both really want to play soccer? Have you noticed, do you feel like they really want to play it?
I think so. If they wanted to stop, no one would care. It's always a little bit hard to tell, right? Because your kids sometimes reflect back at you what you want. My husband plays soccer. He really enjoys it. He's always had fun kicking the ball around with them. But if they weren't into it, nobody would. If they wanted to quit tomorrow, no one would say boo. And in fact, my husband and I basically have the philosophy that we're really glad they're not excellent at sports, because it just seems like so much effort to raise a child prodigy, and my children are not that. But in any dimension, it would take over our lives. And also, I'm not convinced that it's the best way to be, to develop anyway, to both emotionally and just in terms of one's versatility. It seems like it's increasingly the pressure on kids. If kids are into sports, they do them year round, they often get injured. There's kind of a monochromatic aspect to it that I find really awful. And
the recruitment bullshit is getting younger and younger. It's like you're an embryo and they're just right. Get him to Duke University or something, it's really scary.
Right, yeah. So my sons are not like that. They play for their town team. They'll probably play for their high school. And that will be it, I would imagine.
And do you go to the competitions? Are you like a mom who's just fucking kill them? Are you really weird?
That's so funny. I am a total Connecticut soccer mom, and that my whole my whole exploration of Connecticut geography has to do with soccer game driving. And my sons, so the only thing I do as on the sidelines is to sometimes say like, hey, nice try, or like, go Eli, nice job. And my sons tell me uniformly that when I say that, I'm wrong. That in fact, they have done nothing worth complimenting. So I've sort of stopped calling them out specifically, and now I just say like, go New Haven, which seems like, how can they object to that?
Wait, so because you're not saying at the right time,
Yes.
they didn't do anything, you're just like, oh, and they're just like, we didn't do anything.
Right.
Like,
They're like, no, that was not a good play I just made. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm informed of this afterward. Also, they find very amusing. I have a lot of trouble with offsides in soccer, which I think if you've never played soccer, it just doesn't intuitively make sense.
I've played and I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, so even though I have watched at this point dozens of soccer games for years, I have to be told every time there's an offside penalty why that happened. And
what's an offside?
it has to do with, let's see if I can do it. Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There have to be, if you're on offense and you're trying to do a breakaway in soccer, there have to be 2 defenders between you and the goal, and
Right.
you can't get ahead of them.
Okay, got it. Oh God, I'm already like, okay, yes, sir.
Do you hate your father? And if you don't hate your father, why don't you hate your father? Like to be put up to this thing week after week throughout your childhood, you sucked at it. It was a source of humiliation that blocked your social life in every respect. How do you not hate this man?
So, I mean, well, first of all, this was like a thread that ran through my life, but there were all these other interactions was having with my dad, which were lovely and wonderful. My dad is really funny. He was really involved and around and fun. He was like, and in many ways, very supportive of lots of other things I did, and he still is. In some ways, he's like my biggest fan and supporter, along with my mom. So it wasn't ever that I didn't have that. It was that we also had this kind of awful dynamic in this one domain. And I think there's one other reason that I feel this way, which is I have a really strong memory of being probably 6 or 7, and we belonged to a tennis club, and there was a backboard. And my dad was going off to play tennis. Often he played with me, so don't get the sense that I was being neglected. I was not. But on this particular day, his idea was he was going to go play tennis, and I was going to hit on the backboard to practice. I super did not want to hit on the backboard. I had zero interest. I wanted to sit under a tree and read a book. But he insisted I play on the backboard. And I remember that what he said was, you need to know what it's like to not be good at something and to try to get better. Because I was good at school, but I was not good at this. And that was actually profound and stuck with me. And I think there is something useful about that in the world, that you don't always gravitate toward the things that you're naturally adept at, and you sometimes challenge yourself with other things. And I think that sentiment has helped me persevere in situations where I might have given up. And I have to say, so I told you about letting Simon quit guitar, that sometimes I worry with my kids that when they aren't immediately great at something, they immediately ditch it. This is something that kids, why not? So maybe there is some value in forcing kids to push through their resistance to acquiring a skill. Although, in the end, I think, yeah, maybe not. I don't know. Well, I wouldn't do it.
It's something, and I think you talk about this in Sticks and Stones a little bit, but just I don't know how to better express this. Sometimes the good side of being bullied.
Yes, right.
Like
yes.
how it as a person
builds
who was
empathy.
Builds empathy, makes you persevere. As a person who was totally bullied in 8th grade, like, you kind of move forward from your life, right?
Right. So bullying is complicated because there's some kids who are made really vulnerable by it and then carry that vulnerability with them and are more prone to depression and anxiety through adulthood. So that's like a real concern. And we're not good at knowing ahead of time which kids will conquer adversity and which will succumb to it. So that's my reason for thinking bullying is, worth really attending to. On the other hand, most kids who are bullied make it through, and it is true that when adversity doesn't damage you, it makes you stronger, and there is a way in which being humbled can make you have more empathy for other people who you see being in need. And we should not want for our children some kind of perfect path to adulthood where they never encounter setbacks and where they're not hurt, because being hurt is, as painful as it is, that's how we become three-dimensional people.
So if there was like a trauma scale, and you were like you're
This is labor and like pain, and
right.
labor is
The
a
pain
10.
of labor is here's on the trauma scale, number 10. You and this whole tennis thing, and then maybe like being bullied when you were in 8th grade and being divorced from your friends.
Ooh.
Where does that?
So I'm comparing like my whole childhood experience of tennis to 8th grade.
Yes.
Oh,
To-
that's really interesting.
Which seems more. Ugh.
Which was worse? I think 8th grade was cute in a different way, but it was faster. It was over a lot fast. It's like the
Right.
difference between the pain of a marathon and a sprint. Yeah.
This is lurking.
Yeah,
It's sort of a
this
lurky
did not
thing.
ever really go away.
I think you're better at tennis than you think you are. That's
In certain settings, maybe, but
think
not
you are.
consistently.
I think you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if tennis played a role in your life, bullying places other people's lives, like
Breaks you down.
failures, you learned empathy, it was something that was unpleasant for you, you grew your character group. Why are you still fucking doing it?
Right. No, I think that's right.
Don't go find new environments to be bullied at typically.
Yes, and if they do, we think that's a problem, right? Yeah, so I mean, my husband, who's like a very, truly has my best interest at heart. So my husband plays tennis, and we play tennis together. We actually generally have a good time playing together. He is dying for me to stop playing on this team. And it's not simply because it involves more driving around Connecticut. He just also thinks it's like totally unnecessary and not getting me where I want to go. I think he feels like who cares whether I succeed at this very particular thing? I was enjoying social tennis for a few years in there, and now I'm having less enjoyment of it. Why? And I am basically coming around to that point of view, I think. And now I think part of what's happening is some notion of wanting to end on a positive note, like go out on a win.
We're talking about team dynamics.
Yeah.
On a team who suck, who know it. But the people on the team who don't suck also know who sucks.
Right.
And they tend to like make the sucky people feel bad and feel like they would go away.
Yeah.
You get treated that way by your teammates?
Well.
You suck. You suck, Emily.
Well, so now I'm on two teams. The team that was in USTA language, I'm on a 4-5 team and a 4 team. The 4-5 team is the one where I rarely win, and the women on it are really nice, so they don't ever deliberately make me feel like I suck, but in fact, they do because it's kind of true. And or at least like losing is not a thing to do to make yourself valued on a team. That's just sort of a fact. It's not that they don't like me, it's that I lose more than they would like. I mean, what can you do? Like, if you're in a pressurized situation, the people who perform well under pressure are going to be the people who other people look up to. That's kind of, like I said, the brutal reality. So, on my 4-0 team, people want to play with me. They like me. Now, I'm still kind of panicking in these matches and double faulting sometimes, and so my feelings about it are still bad. But I am mostly. I'm just better than a lot of the 4-0 players I'm playing, so I can still win. And in the end, it's really all about winning. So last week I was playing in a 4-0 match, and we won. And the captain of this team said, "Oh, you played so beautifully." Let me just tell you, I did not play beautifully. But the thing of playing at a lower level is you don't have to play beautifully. So I don't know whether now, I don't know what to say about this whole team situation, except talking it out makes me think I really should stop playing on these teams, because you're right.
You had a question.
Yeah. I feel bad now because my question is less witty and
Please.
That's okay.
it's not really a question, it's just a statement, and maybe you can say something about it. But you said before something like your son gave up playing guitar, you let him quit. And I think the phrase "everyone's good at something," so he's not going to be good at something else. I'm not sure everyone is good at something. How does that link with the work you've done on bullying? Because there is a kid that's not attractive and not smart and not funny, maybe, or everyone has good qualities, I suppose. But what if you're not good at guitar or dancing or sports? Like, what do you say to those people?
That's a great question. So I went to Quaker school, kindergarten through 12th grade. That is a really important influence on me. And Quakers believe that there's a little bit of God in everyone. And that goes, I think, to your point that everyone has good qualities. So I have that very deep within me. I think that particularly for children growing up, they have to be in an environment where there are many ways to be good at things. Enough different varied ways that actually everyone has some niche, even if it's not an obvious means toward recognition, some way of being able to be like their best self in the environment they're in. That's, to me, the mark of a good school. So that's what I want for my own kids.
So are your kids good at soccer?
They're fine. They're not amazing at it. They're fine. Yeah, they're not, they don't get nervous. I mean, here's the other thing is I'm incredibly envious of soccer as a team sport. I think that if I could have played a team sport, like a true team sport, tennis is not really a team sport. Even in doubles, you're really having to, it's really like baseball where there are these moments of pressure and you in that moment are performing. Whereas soccer, basketball, football, these are kind of balletic sports where there's really all this coordination. I feel like I would have been much better at that. I love teams. I like collaborating. And that's like another sad fact of the reality that I only know how to play this one game.
Well, then there's got to be some ways you can translate to tennis to lacrosse and stuff, right? I don't know.
No. I mean, just that can run around.
Like,
I played lacrosse for one season in 8th grade. Has nothing to do.
Really?
I
feel
mean,
like
hand-eye coordination on some really basic level.
Yeah, like the ball coming through the air and you putting it in a net kind of thing?
No, it's pretty different. Oh, I didn't tell you the other crazy things. This is really getting a little therapeutic. So one of my excuses, and this maybe is true, is that I write left-handed. I'm a lefty. And so because of that, my dad taught me to play tennis left-handed. But actually, I throw and kick on my right side. It's not that weird for lefties. Lots of lefties have some little bit of so it actually would be much better if I was right dominant. And that's another way in which I'm kind of fighting my own natural tendencies all the time.
Wow.
Yeah. And my forehand for that reason is much weaker than my backhand, which is really strange. Most people who play tennis have powerful forehands and problems with their backhands. I have absolutely the opposite.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, over there.
Okay, so since this is like a therapy session, if we assume this idea of this one psychologist, Philip Romberg, that says there's this idea of multiple selves, that a different part of ourself comes out with different people, with different circumstances, and also because you would talk about in practice that you perform at this different level, I'm curious about the self that exists in practices. I haven't really heard about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. The self of practices is working on solving a problem with some degree of success and is totally relaxed and just mostly enjoying the athleticism. When I started playing tennis again a few years ago, I didn't even want to play games socially. I just wanted to hit the ball. I was just enjoying running around the court. That was fun and felt very different for me than playing tennis growing up. So my psychodrama, really plays out around the competition and the whole idea of coming through in a moment of pressure, which if you're just hitting the ball doesn't exist. And maybe I should go back to that.
Which you do all the time, though. That's the weird thing. Like you're playing at tennis all the time, when you're on TV and stuff and getting interviewed and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
What do you mean? Oh, you think it's the same thing because those are moments of pressure? Right. So why doesn't
people
that
are watching
translate?
you. You're having to land and Mary Lou Retton yourself through a certain situation.
I know, but it seems it's completely different to me, and I can't take the confidence that I have in that kind of performance and make it apply. It feels to me like they're two totally separate parts of myself or just experiences.
The selves thing is really interesting. Oh my God, I just learned so much. Okay, one more question if there's one anywhere. Yes?
It feels like tennis is a safe obsession to admit.
Yeah, and a little silly, if anything.
But are there when you're a journalist, have you ever been obsessed with topics or things that you really got into in your life that are less safe to admit that you can now share with us?
Yes, in fact. So as a journalist, I tend to be drawn to very dark topics about
child pornography,
child sexual abuse, rape, murder, what else? Bullying. I'm sure I could come up with a longer list.
yeah,
To the
well,
point that I have had meetings with editors where they've said things like, "Do you have anything a little more upbeat?" And I've said, "Actually, no." And I think what is happening with those obsessions is that there's a kind of human drama that has a kind of dark gothic quality to it that is honestly really lacking from my own pretty boring, stable life. And so I'm kind of going out and the negative way to say it is that I'm sort of preying on people to understand it more through their stories. The better spin on this is that I have a lot of empathy, and so I'm bringing that empathy to those situations and trying to help people trying to tell other people's stories in a way that will make my readers see them a little differently and see their world differently and be interested in the plight of someone who they might not have been. So professionally, that is definitely my obsession. It's with these kind of dark topics, and I am particularly drawn to stories where it's not black and white. There isn't a completely clear injustice. There's maybe disproportionate punishment, but there isn't whole innocence. That tends to be what I get pulled into, which can be kind of complex, and I like the complexity.
Do you feel like you have empathy for yourself?
Not that much on this particular topic. I just find the whole thing like kind of embarrassing, honestly. And as I've sort of said several times, I kind of feel like I'm doing things I don't understand entirely. And when you're kind of confusing yourself, it's maybe hard to be empathetic. Also, in the moment, I'm not empathetic at all. I'm full of self-loathing, truly.
That's really interesting. I love, like, you think you're so... We think we're so mature and forgiving of ourselves and other people, and we're so empathetic, but then there's like these little weird moments where you're just like, where it all comes out.
Right. And somehow I still have this like hope somewhere in me that I'm going to change this whole part of myself and kind of come out on the other side. But it seems super unlikely.
No, it will. You'll win, and then someone will be like, "That was great, Emily. Let's go get a white wine," and then you'll like do it. Everything will be fine. Let's have some calamari at the country club.
Before we stop, can I ask the audience a question?
Sure.
So who, having listened to this, agrees with Dan and thinks, like, at least I should stop trying to compete in high-pressured situations and take myself off this tennis team? Oh, right. I'm sorry. I'm not. That I'm going to stick with my love of my father. Thank you. But I guess I'm just asking for myself. Who thinks I should quit the tennis team? And who thinks no, like, stick it out?
Stick it out.
Stick it out is losing.
Stick it out.
All right, thank you. That was very
them down.
instructive. Then now this really is some form of therapy for me.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm glad this is helpful, Emily.
It was.
Well, thank you very much for bearing your soul for us.
Thank you for listening.